Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reserved Investments. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to part 5 of my 16,000 subscriber Q&A series. We're going to dive right into the questions because we got a lot of ground to cover. First question, and believe it or not, I get this question often whenever I solicit questions for a Q&A series, and I don't understand why I'm being asked this question to begin with. So this is the question. Sean, I love you. Can I ask a question for your 16,000 Q&A series? The answer is yes. That's the whole point of the Q&A series. You guys have to ask the question so I can answer it on camera. Without those two equal parts, the Q&A series doesn't exist. So when I solicit questions for an upcoming Q&A, please do not come into the comment section and say, Sean, I love you, or heaven forbid, Sean, I hate you. May I ask a question for your upcoming Q&A series? The fact that I am posting the video soliciting questions for an upcoming Q&A should be enough for you to connect the dots and go, oh, I just go into the comment section and I ask my question, and eventually he answers it on camera. That's the way this works. And by the way, I don't care if you love me or hate me. My Q&A series are pretty much open for anybody that watches my content. I don't care whether you love me, loathe me, want me dead, want to marry me, want to do something inappropriate to me. Please don't let me know what that is. Please do not. But whatever it is, you are welcome to ask a question when I solicit questions for these Q&As. With that said, let's go to a real question where somebody actually asks me to utilize my brain power a little bit here. Sean, I have a question about some very specific Funko Pops. That I can help with. I have the entire regular show set, which currently sells in the secondary market for between $1,000 to $1,500. I have a small emotional attachment to the figures, but I favor the memories I had actually watching the show with my family and friends more. I don't believe these figures were a victim of mass-produced scarcity. All right, let me stop you there. These are FunkoPops. The entire Funko Pop line was produced out of mass-produced scarcity. If it's Funko Pop, it is mass-produced scarcity. There is very little organic collectability in Funko Pops. That's like saying Beanie Babies have organic collectability. No, they do not. A lot of the people that bought Beanie Babies did not love Beanie Babies. They bought it for the speculation, the financial speculation that was involved in those particular products. It's the same thing that happened back in the late 1980s, early 1990s with Pez dispensers. People were going nuts, paying a premium for Pez dispensers. Go watch the Pez Outlaw on Netflix. You'll learn a lot. That also was a market that had a little bit of organic collectability because Pez were collected even before that. But overall, it was mass-produced scarcity that propelled these items to insane heights back in the 1990s where people were paying a premium for this stuff. Same thing that's happening with Funko Pops right now. It'll be interesting to see if Funko Pops 10, 20, 30, 40 years out, if some of them do have organic collectability. In my opinion, use a lot of caution in this particular market. You go on to ask, I've managed to downsize my entire Funko Pop collection, 200 plus figures, good for you, to just these 5 figures, and I'm now considering letting them go. My question is, would you recommend selling into the market currently, holding on for memory's sake, or holding on with the speculation that they will be worth more in the future? If you take the time to share your thoughts, I would absolutely appreciate it. Of course, I'm going to share my thoughts. Please do not be like the first person that asked me a question, if they could ask me a question. You already know you can ask me a question because you're asking me a question and you're just waiting for me to answer. So now let me give you my answer now that it's 2 o'clock in the morning Eastern Standard Time. The answer is if you do not have an emotional attachment to these particular items, you're ready to let them go, you're not going to buy them back again, and you can make profit on this particular purchase that you bought these 5 figures for, by all means, sell them, take that money, invest it in an S&P 500 index fund, or heaven forbid, invest it in some other collectible outside of mass-produced scarcity. Do not put it back in the Funko Pops. Go after something else, even if it's Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, vintage video games, whatever it is. Put it somewhere else. Take the profit and run with it. That is the best advice I would give you. Now, that being said, if you do have an emotional attachment to these items, where you feel if you go and sell them into the market, at some point in the future, you're going to buy them back again, don't sell them into the market because you are not ready. You are not at a position where you're ready to let this stuff go. So you will most likely regret it. Again, I do not have a crystal ball, guys. I cannot look into the future and tell you exactly what an item is going to sell for on November 14th, 2035. Nobody has the ability to do that. But if we're looking at Funko Pops, most of this stuff is based on speculation and mass-produced scarcity with few exceptions. The particular show that you are mentioning here is not an ultra-popular show either. So that tells me there's going to be limited value for these items going well into the future, 10, 20 years. So use that advice. If you want to take that advice, you could probably do a lot worse, because I do know there's a lot of people that are hoarding Funko Pops right now, still thinking they're going to potentially go up in value in the future. In most cases, you would be better off putting that money in a simple index fund and holding it for 20 years. I'm telling you the truth as to how these markets work. Next question. Sean, can you share your thoughts on the collectible statue market? Sideshow, Prime 1, First 4, all that wonderful fun stuff. Okay, full disclosure, this is a very speculative niche market. I am not a fan of the collectible statue market. I never was. I did get involved with Top Toys in the beginning there because I recognized it was a speculative frenzy. I bought some of those pieces and quickly sold them back into the market for a profit. I do engage in speculation, short-term speculation in a lot of these markets. When I know I can come in, I can profit, and I can get out. I do not like this market over the long term. This is, again, one of those markets where they limit the product. They convince the Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters it's rare. They all buy in. They all watch the prices on the secondary market, and they go, look at that. The price of this particular figure, this particular statue went up in value, therefore I made a wise decision. This is another market that is governed by mass-produced scarcity. It is going to take decades, yes, decades, for us to figure out if any of these items actually have organic collectability. It's just like I have a lot of people that come to me through my consulting business. They love First 4 Figures. No offense to First 4 Figures. They make awesome items. So does Sideshow. I love all the products they produce, but they're all rooted in mass-produced scarcity. This is not something where a kid walked into a toy store for the first time, bought these particular items, took them home, played with them, used them beyond belief, sold them at a yard sale for a few dollars, and now 20, 30, 40 years later, they want to buy back their childhood. That is not what is happening here. There is very organic collectability in this market. Use a lot of caution. That's all I'm saying. Next question, which kind of does a little bit tie into this. Hi, Sean. What are your thoughts on late 80s and 90s era video games in general? Do you think it will go the way of Atari, or are these games more iconic and enduring, akin to great classic books? Okay, please do not compare the vintage video game market, or any market in the pop culture side of the trade, to that of the antique side of the trade. There are different market dynamics. When we look at classic books, when we look at classic literature, that is a niche market in itself. There's a lot of opportunity in that market if you're patient, you really love first edition classic books. It cannot be compared to video games. It cannot be compared to even vintage comic books. It cannot be compared to vintage toys or Nike Air Jordans. That's not always a bad thing, guys. Please do not cut me up in the comment section thinking that I'm putting out a video here and giving you an answer where antiques are better than pop culture collectibles, because that's what I get accused of. I'm just saying it's governed by different market dynamics. If you want to go after video games, go after video games. You don't have to come up with reasons as to why you should invest in video games if you truly love the hobby, if you love the market, and you do see opportunity and potential in that market. Full disclosure, even with the graded video game bubble now bursting upon us, there is still an opportunity to invest in vintage, factory sealed, and graded video games. I want to make that very clear. I'm not against this market. I'm against market manipulation and certain companies allegedly coming into this market manipulating prices. That's what I'm against. Now, to answer your question, first of all, you are correct to call out Atari here. Atari does not have long-term collectability. I want to make that very clear. Those of you that are still going after vintage Atari games, factory sealed vintage Atari games, even scarce or quote unquote rare vintage factory sealed Atari games, in my opinion, you are making a mistake. That market is dead and gone. A lot of the people that are clamoring to collect video games are going towards Nintendo. Vintage Nintendo systems, vintage Nintendo video games. Nintendo has the wins at their sale, and they're the ones that you want to invest in if you're going to invest in these markets long term. I even tell people, use caution if you're going after Sega Genesis, use caution if you're going after TurboGrafx-16, use caution if you're going after Neo Geo, use caution if you're going after any of the other esoteric systems that were released in the early 1990s, the late 1980s, because a lot of the collectors that are coming into this realm, they see dollar signs, they see Nintendo as the future. Nintendo has pretty much transplanted themselves as the proverbial video game king. Even greater than Sony, even greater than Microsoft, which yes, there is potential in certain classic PlayStation games, but for the most part, if I was you, I was trying to invest in this market, I would stick with Nintendo. I would not get sidetracked. As much as I love the TurboGrafx-16, I would never ever recommend that you put your money in high-end vintage factory sealed TurboGrafx-16 games. I would tell you go after Nintendo. Nintendo pretty much has the power to bring in younger collectors, if there was ever a company out there that did, simply because if Nintendo releases a Mario game 20 years from now, there are people that will come into the market and go, oh my God, I love Mario. I remember playing Mario 20 years ago. I can go all the way back to the 80s and buy a copy of Super Mario Brothers, and I'm connected to that franchise. Atari doesn't have that power. Sega doesn't have that power anymore. And even though Sega is still in existence, if we look at the sad state of Sega right now, it's pretty bad. Let's be realistic. I do know that they are talking about bringing back a lot of their franchises. Every time, though, they promise to do this, it always leads to disappointment. If Sega could pull off a home run with one of these vintage remakes, whether it's Shinobi, Altered Beast, whatever it is, good for them. I just don't see it happening enough to drive demand in a lot of their earlier games. I do know, I'm a collector at heart. I know the video game market very well. I do know there's a lot of collectors out there that go nuts for Sega Genesis, Sega CD, Sega Saturn, and Dreamcast titles. I'm just telling you, if you're attempting to invest long term, Nintendo is your answer right now. Could that potentially change? Yes, that could change. But it's not going to make Sega games or TurboGrafx-16 games or Neo Geo games or Philips CDI games or 3DO games any more appealing 5, 10, 15, 20 years out. You need to really look at these markets for how they operate and how they are. Atari is pretty much dead in the water as well. So is ColecoVision, so is Intellivision, so is Vectrix, so is all of those vintage pre-Nintendo video game systems. So again, the answer to your question is Nintendo, Nintendo, vintage Nintendo, vintage Nintendo. That's really where you want to be. It's the best answer I can give you. Next question. Sean, congrats on 16,000 subscribers. I'm one of the newest subscribers thanks to your crossover with Swoggle House. Yes, that was a very good interview, I must say. We talked an awful lot about comic books. I created a lot of enemies in that video. I will be honest. I got a lot of interesting feedback from that video. Most people did agree with me. Most people really liked my analysis. There were some individuals, though, that had a problem with me coming on his channel and just telling them the way these markets work over the long term. And there are people out there that are continually talking about that interview. I'm still getting messages, still getting emails, whole 9 yards. It's very interesting. I'm glad that I was able to at least spur the amount of debate that we now have in the vintage comic book market with my commentary on how these markets work long term. And I'm glad that there are people that are at least being exposed to what I teach on this channel, which is classic collectibles finance. Now on to your questions, and you are asking a lot of questions here. Oh my. First questions. Could you address the importance of factoring in on insurance on items and how this affects your return? Yeah, if you're going to invest large sums of money in the antiques and collectibles trade, like if you're putting $10,000 into a comic book or even like $5,000 in a vintage toy or $20,000 on a rare coin, you have to have insurance on these items. I've done videos on this. I explain this in depth in upcoming videos. I will tell you how to calculate returns on collectible items. There's a lot of people that want me to do a whiteboard video on that. Insurance will be a topic in that particular video. It is an expense. It is an expense that is necessary if you are investing in items of a physical nature, which when we look at antiques and collectibles, that's what they are. Next question. Of all the collectibles of the last 50 to 100 years that were once hot, which do you think has the least chance of ever coming back into the public consciousness and returning to collectability? I honestly would say Hummels. If you know what Hummels are, if you study that market, if you see how that market pretty much propelled the popularity, then pretty much died out, you will see that Hummels have the less chance of coming back into vogue. There are other markets that do have a chance of coming back into vogue. I will cover that in a separate video. I'm not going to go off topic in this video on that, but I will tell you, I would answer Hummels. Hummels are pretty much dead. There are certain Hummels out there, I want to be very clear on this, that still sell for thousands of dollars, but 95% of all the Hummels produced and being sold in the secondary market are pretty much dying. It is a dying collecting category at present time. If you don't know what a Hummel is, simply Google it, and you will learn all about the history of Hummels. Next question. Do you ever see AOL and internet CDs becoming organically collectible, considering they're one of the only tangible items of one of mankind's most important feats of technology? The answer is no, not really. It's a gimmick. I do know that there are a lot of people also that held these items. There's a lot of people that are hoping that they do become a thing. I just do not see people paying a premium for AOL CDs or any of that stuff from the early 1990s. It could be a thing, but it would be very uncommon, and it would be a very niche market. It would be akin to almost like comparing it to matchbook collecting, if you know what that is. And honestly, I would consider matchbook collecting still having more organic demand than collecting internet CDs made by AOL and other companies back in the 1990s. So it's just my opinion. I know a lot of people ask me that question. I'm sorry to say, I just don't see it. Next question. It's the 30th anniversary of Beanie Babies, and no one seems to care. I usually think of nostalgia as a 30-year cycle, so is the nostalgia for these just not happening? The answer is Beanie Babies did not have a lot of organic collectability. That's why they're not making a comeback like a lot of people thought they would. In order for something to make a comeback, there has to be people that really love that particular item and grew up with it and used it. Beanie Babies were bought for their investment potential. Once the investment potential went away, because it never really was there to begin with, a lot of people got hurt and a lot of people forgot about Beanie Babies. Now, to be fair, the company that makes Beanie Babies is still in business. Guess what? Beanie Babies are not making a comeback anytime soon. There are some that do have organic collectability, but again, they are few and far between. There are certain Beanie Babies that do command a premium on the secondary market, even in the year 2024. But overall, the market is dead. I'm sorry to tell you. Next question. Sean, I would like your thoughts on the trajectory of collectibles for music phenomena like the Beatles. Okay, I do not like Beatles investing. I do not like Elvis memorabilia. I don't like any of that. The long-term trajectory is actually dim because really right now what's propelling those items into the stratosphere is simply the fact that people grew up with those particular musicians and they want to own something that was produced by those particular musicians. That's all there is to it. Eventually, pop culture collecting, eventually society is going to move on. So be very careful in that particular market. Now with that, there is a caveat here. If you're going after something really esoteric, something truly rare, like something that belonged directly to John Lennon or Elvis Presley in that matter, that's a little bit different. That's in a different category, but make no mistake, if you were going to spend the money to buy something that belonged to John Lennon or Elvis Presley, just keep in mind, I would rather you go after something that truly has historic appeal, like something that belonged to George Washington or Abraham Lincoln for that matter. You would get more bang for your buck over the long term investing in history than that of pop culture. That's what I teach on this particular YouTube channel, and I know that rubs people a wrong way in certain instances. People think that I'm trying to manipulate the market. If you look at the history of the antiques and collectibles trade, that's how it's always been. Antiques make better long-term investments, especially historic antiques, than that of pop culture. When we look at the Beatles, when we look at Elvis, that is rooted solely in pop culture. So keep that in mind. Next question. Sean, I've been watching since the Nintendo Power 1 video. I actually have the 9.6 graded copy, and it is not faded green like the 9.8. I've posted it on Facebook and eBay, but it's probably heading to Heritage for the February 2024 auction. Thought someone would want it before it goes to Heritage. Okay. You have been leaving this comment for me in multiple videos, and it's finally time where I got time to respond to this directly. I will tell you, I do know that somebody already bought this particular item off you. I will also say one thing here, though. Do me a favor. Whenever you get an item graded, even if you think your 9.6 copy is in better condition than a 9.8, don't go telling everybody that, because it honestly lowers the perceived value of the item you have, because it just seems to me that what you are doing is you're looking at your 9.6 and you're going, hey, this should have been a 9.8. Well, I hate to tell you, CGC did not grade it a 9.8. And I want to be very clear here. The 9.6 copy that you have is in beautiful condition. I agree with you. It is a beautiful 9.6. But unfortunately, it's not a 9.8. So don't compare it to a 9.8. And I do know this is a mute conversation because I actually know the person you sold the 9.6 copy to. That's all I'm going to say. So that's how I'm going to end part 5 here. Any questions and concerns, please let me know in the comment section below. Part 6 will premiere fairly soon. Thank you for watching and have a great night.